Easily in my top 5 high gain amp models in the Axe FX3, and easily in my top 5 favorite real amps is the Mesa Boogie Dual Rectifier. We've got a couple of different models here in the 3. The Recto 1 is based around, I think it's a Rev F from memory, so the old 2-channel Recto. I own a Rev G, great sounding amp, really, really cool what you can do with it with the different switches and the different channels. But basically on that amp, I just stick to the red channel on the modern mode, and that's what Recto 1 red models. So we're going to spend a lot of time there. And we've also got the 3-channel rectifier modeled here with Recto 2. And as you can see, we've got the vintage mode for both red and orange there. So let's have a look at how to dial these things in. Well, I guess how I like to dial them in for the sort of tones that I like, and a couple of cool tricks that you can do here in the box to, I think, make them even more appropriate for sort of modern tones and to help them sit in a mix a little bit easier. Before we get going though, I'm going to play around with a couple of different cab blocks here. I've got these York Audio impulses, which are stock, then the ML 2x12 Zilla, and then over here we've got some greenbacks from Own Hammer, and then in number D, someone's going to pull me up on that, on channel D, I should say, I've got this IR that I made of a 4x12 Marshall with V30s. It's the actual IR that I used to record with, and it's based on the actual cab that I record with as well. So my real amp into that cab sounds pretty close, I think, to this Recto 1 Red. Anyway, this is what it sounds like straight up. Which is, you know, pretty fizzy, pretty bassy, not very defined. Probably, if you've ever played a rectifier in a music store before, there's probably your impression of it, like, whoa, dude, there's so much low end and there's so much gain, but is that even going to work in a mix? Who knows? Let's dial it in. The thing with rectos that you have to sort of deal with is the amount of low end, so don't be afraid to back the bass off. This is what it sounds like with the bass at 0. And I find if you take the bass to 0 and the mid to 10, it kind of sounds like a Marshall. A pretty good Marshall as well. That's pretty interesting. So that's the extreme with the bass control and the mid control. The opposite, I guess, is your, like, you know, metal zone guitar saw kind of sound. Let's not even bother with that. So bass on 10 on a Recto is a pretty bad idea, but bass pretty low kind of works. So what I'll do is I'll set it to around 3. And let's play around with the mid-range control now, because as we just heard with the mids all the way out, it's, I guess, what a lot of people would associate as like the rectifier sound, and it's probably the worst way to set your rectifier because you're going to get lost in a mix once bass and drums kick in. On my real Recto, I normally set the mid-range around here, just as I said before, because it actually makes the guitar able to be heard in a mix with bass and drums. Let's do the same for the treble control. Off, it's pretty smooth. There's kind of a sweet spot on the treble control as well, where, I don't know, it just sounds like the whole amp opens up a little bit when you sort of get in this like 6 to 7 range. I'll give you a better example of that with it down around 4. Which sounds pretty cool. You can also then, you know, you can play around with the mids here if you want more of your sort of 90s new metal kind of thing. Dip the mid-range with the treble high. I would personally add a little bit more mid-range, but that's a cool sound. It's sort of the sound of an era, isn't it? So that's pretty cool. Let's play around with the presence control with it off. You get this. You can hear the presence control on a Marshall. I always feel like it's just a fizz control, and it's kind of like a fizz control on the Mark series amps as well. But this presence control sort of like works with the other three controls there, where it sounds like it's acting on the top end and the mids as well. Like if you really push it, it's not super duper ice picky and fizzy. And you can hear, you can kind of run it anywhere, I think, from probably around 4 all the way up to about 7 or 8, and it still sounds pretty good. So this is kind of depending on, again, it's depending on what you like and depending on what's going to be appropriate for the setting that you're in. I'll just leave it at around 4 because that doesn't sound too bad, but don't be afraid to crank this control all the way up. And it's almost like the treble control is more of the fizz control on this amp. If you hear the treble all the way up, then it does get super fizzy. Although I don't think that sounds too bad on its own, but I would definitely back that off, especially when I'm playing loud and you sort of get the Fletcher Munson effect kicking in. One big thing with these amps is the master volume control. Do not be afraid to run the master volume really low and compensate with the level, because this is what happens when you crank the master. You know, like everybody always goes, oh man, you need power amp distortion. You know, when you're playing a Marshall, you got to push those things. And that doesn't really work with the dual rectifier, because say I run the master at like 6, this is what happens. I'll compensate with the level in a sec. You can hear that lowering the master really opens up the high end there, where it sort of gets probably a little bit too fizzy here, so I would bring that up. But then once you push it too much, it just gets really mid-rangey and saturated and flubby sounding. So don't be afraid to run the master like around 2 on this, because I think that is probably where it sounds best. And it's just got this beautiful sort of chewiness to it, where it really makes you want to dig in with the palm mutes. And oh, dude, this is the sound, you know, when you think of that dual rectifier to me. And that's without any boosting or anything like that. I find the Axe-FX 3 Rectos, they're a lot more usable in that sense, where you don't really have to boost them. But when you do boost them, you can use the preamp section and use the input boost. My favorite boost to use is a super overdrive. Just at the stock settings, this is what it does. It's glorious. That does add a bit of fizz though, so don't be afraid to compensate for that by, backing the treble off. You can even sort of compensate by boosting a little bit of bass, because the super overdrive is going to be cutting bass. Oh, that sounds good. Let's have a listen to it with some of these different IRs. Here is my IR. And you can hear that's pretty mid-scoop, so I would compensate by pushing the mids, kind of like I set my real amp and cab. That's pretty cool. Let's have a listen to the Own Hammer with greenbacks. Greenbacks in a Recto, I think, is really cool. You can hear there that's super mid-rangey, so this is definitely a case where you can scoop out the mid. And then let's have a listen to the ML212. This is more of a modern thing. You can get the Recto to gent, just push the mids, and then play on the the middle combination on a twin humbucker guitar. I'm playing my PRS SC245. You get this happening. So that's pretty cool. Again, you can then increase the input drive if you want more of that kind of modern, super saturated high gain thing, playing on the bridge pickup. Which sounds pretty cool. And then going back, let's go back to the cab that we started with. Which kind of sounds like the Marshall from hell at the moment. I'm really pretty pleased with that sound at the moment. That, to me, is more of your sort of modern hard rock thing going on there, and that would sit really well with loud bass and drums, whereas if I wanted more of the kind of scoopy kind of thing, just bring the mids down, even boost a little bit of presence with this cab, and it's going to sound super cool. Okay, one trick that I really like, at least on my Mesa, it has a bold and a spongy switch, and the spongy setting basically just like cuts a bunch of voltage like right at the end of the amp. So we can emulate that by using, in the power supply section, the Variac feature. So basically, try the Variac at 75%, compensate with the level a little bit, and you get a really cool, even squishier Mesa kind of tone. And then we can also emulate the Trude Rectifier, basically just increase the supply sag. This is what it does. You can hear there's this sort of like hair around the low end happening now, which that's when I'm recording, that's what I always try to dial in my real rectifier. So I might even push the bass just a little bit more and the mid-range just a little bit more to bring out some of that hair. Let's have a listen to that. absolutely filthy. I'm going to hit save on that because I really like that. I'll share this preset if you guys want to grab it as well. So that's how I would go about doing all of this with the Recto 1. What we can do is let's hit copy channel A to channel B and to channel C, and then this way we can compare a couple of the different models. What I'm going to do on channel B is I'll replicate these settings, but I'm going to use the Recto 1 Orange Modern because I think people always overlook the orange channel. It's pretty similar to the red channel, but it does have a slightly different character going on. Let's do this. We'll turn the boost on, and I'll go back to those power supply settings, get that happening. And with channels, of course, you can basically set this up like the real amp. You could have 3 channels, with your 2 different modern modes and then your red mode. Let's just set that Variac to 75 again. Here's what the red mode sounds like. Oh, I better tweak the presence as well. So I'll just push that up a little bit more. There we go. So this is what it sounds like on orange, then I'll switch back to red halfway through. And as you can hear, there's a definite difference there. Both are really good and both are really kind of classic Recto there. On channel C, let's go with the modern Recto 2 Red. I'll also push the presence a bit, and I'll do the same sort of supply sag trick with all of this, just so it stays pretty consistent. You can see as well that the Recto 2, they all default with the master volume at 2, which is pretty cool, so it sort of does that job for you. I'll also boost this. Let's have a listen to that now, and I'll swap between all 3. That's a pretty cool tone, but I guess you can hear why people really like the old Rev G and Rev F rectifiers. They have just got more character, I think. The newer one, to me, I don't know what it is. It's just like maybe a little bit too saturated at the same settings. You can obviously go in and, tweak the input drive and all the EQ and sort of find the sweet spot in there if you like the sound of the other one, which I would definitely recommend doing. So there you go. There's kind of a roundup of the Rectos, or the ones I like. We obviously didn't have a look at the red, no, not the red, the orange modern on Recto 2. So let's do that really quickly. I'll just copy this channel over. I love the channels thing as well. I don't have to come up with a bunch of different presets. It's all in the box. The other thing you could do is have 2 amps in the 3 and blend different rectifier styles as well and sort of get the best of both worlds going on there. So let's have a look at, what was I going to do? Orange Modern. Yep, that's cool. Put the input boost on. We will turn the level up a little bit because these ones are always a bit quieter. Supply sag, roughly where it was before. Variac, again, this is, I'm just being rough with this now. So let's have a listen to that one. That orange modern on Recto 2 sounds really good. I like that. I did say we were going to go, but we're not going to go just yet because I'll show you the vintage mode on each of these. This is actually a really cool mode on the normal amp that a lot of people just kind of overlook because, let's lower the master just a little bit so we don't blow our eardrums out, and the level. This is what it sounds like. So it's a lot honkier, but the way that I use this on the real amp is essentially like to set up a blues tone. So if you set the input drive quite low, and essentially think of it like a Fender, so use the Magic 6 settings, bass at 2, mids around 3, treble around 6. We can leave the presence where it is. We can increase the master volume a little bit. We can add some supply sag. I'll leave the variac where it is. It sounds really, really sweet on the neck pickup of this guitar. And then the other thing that you can do is use a saturation switch here. Set it to on, and it sounds like this. Which I think sounds pretty good. So the Recto 1 orange vintage mode sounds pretty similar as well. And yeah, now we can go. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I will put up the preset with my settings for the Recto 1 and all this kind of stuff, as well as my IR in the video description. If you've got suggestions for other amps to have a look at in the Axe FX3, please leave a comment, let me know, because it's always a bit of a fun journey doing this and delving into different amps and trying to dial them in and not make them suck. Of course, if you think it sucks, let me know in the comments and I can learn something. So until then, you guys take care and I'll see you around very soon.